Domestic resource mobilization is an integral part of fiscal governance, and looking at the current predicament, fiscally speaking, that Zambia is going through, characterized by debt, obviously the subject of resource mobilization takes prominence, and that is exactly what we're going to focus on today's episode of The People's Space. The name, as usual, is Wenson Mavoro, and my guest for today is somebody who's known to be, or to have worn so many hats, and we are talking about the Chief Electoral Officer. We are talking about the economist. Better yet, others know him as, an activist or an advocate of socio-economic governance. And ladies and gentlemen, this is no other than Patrick Nshindano. Patrick, you're welcome to the People's Space. And for those that have been wondering where I fished you out from, well, you should know that is the memo here. We find a way of bringing people that may think they're hiding elsewhere. We bring them over here just to be able to talk to them and, of course, discuss important issues. So, Patrick, it's great to have you, my brother, and it's been a while.
Indeed, definitely exciting to be here, and good to see you again. You can't hide from a brother. I mean, no matter how you try, even if you're going some hole somewhere, you definitely pull you out of there. And pleasure to be here. Exactly.
So let's just kick this conversation off. First of all, for those that may not know, or those that had just the privilege of seeing this man on TV, talking elections, others have seen you on TV talking about economic issues. Beyond that, who is Patrick Nshindano?
Yeah, that's a very difficult question. I always find it hard to answer that question. You and I have interacted on many forums, and mainly because of my cross-sector experience. I've worked in the private sector, I've worked in civil society, and of course, most recently in the public sector. But on a personal level, I am basically a family man. I am married to one wife, 2 kids, 2 lovely kids.
A very important detail there.
Yes, indeed. 2 lovely kids, which I adore so much. And they make my life much, 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 much better to live on. When in my free time, I am a handyman, which you may not know. I love to do a lot of work, things like gardening, DIYs. So if you hear that Nshindano has been electrocuted or fallen off the roof, that's because of my DIY bag. But one of the things that I love doing in my personal time also, which many people do not know, is babysitting. I love babysitting. You leave me with kids anytime, I will not miss you. That is something that I love doing so much. I think they bring so much joy, and you learn so much from kids. Academically, of course, my background with bachelor's in economics as my first degree, went on to do an MBA, but also based on my experience with electoral governance at the Electoral Commission of Zambia. I also did do a master's in electoral policy and administration, thanks to the Italian embassy, who basically gave me a scholarship to do that. And of course, a PhD in business and administration. Please do not call me doctor yet.
I was actually getting to it. I was like, did I forget a detail or something?
No, do not call me doctor yet, because it has not been conferred on me, despite finishing the program. So we are still waiting for that conferment. I'll be sure to invite you as my brother to say, hey,
definitely,
this is the time.
I'll be honored. Definitely.
I'll be honored. Yeah. So in brief, that's basically about me.
Okay. Yeah. So quite an interesting, insight into who Patrick is. And anyway, for those that are looking to, if you've got some questions in terms of your garden, or you need a bulb fixed or whatever, this is the man for you. But hey, obviously...
At owner's risk.
Okay, so the disclaimer is pretty much clear. At owner's risk. Yeah. Okay, so now, obviously, a lot of people, when you went to the Electoral Commission of Zambia and took on that responsibility or that role, of course, you did your part. okay, excellently. I say excellently, not because I want to make you feel better, but of course, I had to ask a few people, how is my brother doing there?
Yeah.
So that if they tell me that you're not doing okay, I just give you a call and say, hello, you are failing. Can you try something else? Or maybe let's go back to the field here, But having done an amazing job at the Electoral Commission of Zambia, and ever since you left the public eye, people would love to know, what have you been up to lately, What have you been up to?
Initially, I thought I would actually have a lot of time to myself, a lot of time to my family. And if you recall, even in my departure message, I did say that I will spend a little bit more time with my family because really the job was robbing in that sense. You really had time to spend with family, especially little ones. And I don't want to be that parent that wakes up and see my kids are already in university. I'm like, where is that time gone? So I did try to do that, but unfortunately, I've also been quite busy. I've had the rare opportunity to work with a number of international organizations in my consultancy role, but also in supportive role, different technical capacity roles, electoral observations, trainings, learnings, so many things that we've been able to do. Research organizations include the Commonwealth, the UN, Department of Policy, Political Affairs, the New York office, International Community of the Great Lakes Region, IGAD, among others. So I've been quite privileged and honored, really. I'm quite humbled by that experience that I've gained so much. But in addition, of course, like I did mention, investing in my academics as well, being able to have the time to finalize my PhD, something that has been on the tables for quite a while. So it was good to finally do away and finish my thesis, which I'll be able to share once conferred nicely. So among others, those are the things that I've been doing. But like I said, the main thrust now is basically consultancy and advisory services, tailored towards public policy and electoral management.
I can't help but think already what to call you when you finish that PhD. Dr. P, Dr. PN. Anyway, but anyway, we'll get there. We'll figure out a name when we get there. So just to be clear, because some people think when you're out of the public eye, such as where you were, all of a sudden things are bad. You're unemployed, so you've heard it for yourself. The man is busy. He's not just loafing around. He's quite busy. But let's get now to the transition. You did quite very well for yourself in the civil society space, and a lot of people felt this guy really is a gem in this particular sector, and people appreciated your work that you were doing. And I was one of the people that was privileged to work with you, even in that space, before you transitioned. Just tell us how the transition was from the civil society organizations to a parastatal. Like, how was that transition?
Okay. I always get that question, and everybody's asking, how did you find yourself? Even when somebody asks, I was with the Electoral Commission. Where were you before? Like civil society. How did that happen? Because it's something that many people do not foresee, or even society does not expect that one from civil society would find themselves in the public sector, and particularly in that particular role. But for me, I think it was really a no-brainer, and it was not so different. As you know very well, electoral governance is something that we dealt with even while I was in civil society, promoting good governance, social justice, and so forth. We did work a lot on public policy reforms in national development planning. We were in the forefront as civil society then, leading CSPR then. We did coordinate a number of civil society organizations to have input into national development planning processes, something I believe the organizations still do up to date. So there was very close interaction with the public sector, as it were, even if you're working in civil society. And even now, I'm sure that is still the case. They still do that. Of course, be it from a different angle where you're bringing in the accountability mechanisms, because civil society are also very strong watchdogs to see to it that government is doing the right things. But in addition to that, they are providing alternatives to what should be, to better the lives of the people. electoral governance is a critical component of any country in terms of development. You cannot talk about the well-being if your democracy is failing. Part of the dividends of democracy is to see to it that the well-being of the citizens are getting better. It's not just about changing governments and so forth. And where you have a failing democracy, it has the ripple effect. You start seeing this in the well-being of human development indicators going down. And therefore, it was a no-brainer. And unexpected, though. I did get somebody. Of course, I didn't get permission. I won't mention them. They did come up, approach me and say, well, there's this position at the commission. They've advertised. I think you'd be an excellent fit. I said, are you sure? I said, yeah, go ahead and apply for it. I think you'd be an excellent fit.
Excellent fit.
Yeah, not knowing anybody and so forth.
Yeah.
So okay, let me do it. I applied.
Because I was actually getting to that, because people thought, people had questions. Okay, who did Patrick know? Because there's no way you just jump from today, you are at CSPR, tomorrow you are the chief electoral officer. It just doesn't happen like that. So tell us, who was your connects? Let's share these things.
Indeed. No, I think contrary to those views, it's one of those. And I always tell people, if you are good at what you do, you're professional, people are able to recognize what you do and appreciate that effort. And I think this was the case where somebody came through and said, well, I didn't even see that advert because it was brought to my attention by that individual. A very renowned lady, actually, my mother, very prominent in this country, but I won't mention her because I didn't get permission to do so.
Okay.
She's the one that did highlights it. And at that particular point in time, I didn't know her at a personal level. So she,
wow.
Yes. Okay. So she just called and said, this is me, such and such an individual. I was actually saying, oh, wow, this is somebody that has been known in history in Zambia as somebody who really championed rights of Zambians and been in the forefront in terms of making sure that Zambia becomes a better place.
Yeah.
So I was quite humbled to receive a phone call in the first place from her. And later on to say, look, young man, there's this, can you take it up? Can you apply? I think you'd be a good fit. And I did apply. Surprisingly, I was called. I didn't think I would be called anyway because of the same notion that you have to know somebody, you have to be connected. I was called for interviews. Even when I went for interviews, I said, okay, let me go for interviews, see where this goes. And before I knew it, I was given the appointment. So I said, okay, excellent. But even when I got there, it's not like I went in blank, especially that it was unexpected. These are things that we've been working on as civil society. We have been doing the Citizens Manifesto. We've been providing support to political parties in terms of ensuring that they incorporated policies in their manifestos that would speak to the well-being of our citizens. So it was no brainer, really. So even when we got there, I was one of the...
I love the fact that you mentioned that, Patrick, because I remember one time a prominent political figure, went on cameras and told the nation that Patrick doesn't know what he's doing at ECZ. I won't say the name as well. Coming from the background, that you've just mentioned, having worked with political parties, knowing one or two things about the workings of an important institution such as that, against the background of people saying, this guy doesn't know anything.
Yeah.
They've put you, in fact, they called you a puppet, by the way. They said you were just a puppet.
Yes,
Was it true that you were a puppet? Maybe, I think.
Well, I think results speak for themselves. And one thing I loved is first when I got there, there was acceptance on a number of fronts. We did have a few, of course, like you have indicated, that said, no, this is not the right individual. But generally, political parties did receive me very well, both opposition and ruling. And I was quite humbled by that. But also the fact that at the same time, I did receive bashing on both fronts. The opposition thought I was PF. The PF thought I was opposition. And that told me that I was doing the right thing. Because the fact that everybody was not comfortable with me told me that, yes, I was being professional and doing what I'm supposed to do. And I think for an EMB, that's how it should be. You should never be comfortable in any corner. Because you need to be seen to be impartial and you need to be impartial. So those two go hand in hand, not just you being impartial, but you also need to be seen to be impartial. the moment you're seen to be inclined to one side or the other, it compromises not yourself only, but also the institution. Electoral management is about trust, public trust. So the moment you lose that public trust, even when you're doing the right thing, it makes your life very, very difficult to be able to implement that which you need to implement.
So beside all these negative voices, of doubt, maybe affiliating you to political, parties and all that. And then earlier on, you mentioned something about whilst on the job, not having so much time for your kids.
Yeah.
I just wanted to tap your mind on that. How was that affecting you? How did you navigate that? They always say, the higher you go, the lonelier it becomes, except the coolness that people talk about. But obviously at the top, they say it's lonely. So how were you navigating all that? How were you striking a balance?
Yeah,
did it affect you negatively in a way?
Not necessarily. I think the only negative side of it was on the part of my kids, because I like taking out my kids. I like to go to a park or go see a movie or whatever, spend time publicly with my kids, allow my kids to be kids, which I couldn't do then. Because, of course, depending on the space where you go into and who you bump into, oh, no, we saw Mr. Nshindano with party ABC and all those things. So you need to protect yourself from that.
So you couldn't go for a movie as you would
As I would, no, definitely not. You need to protect yourself from the perceptions, but also from what might come your way in terms of attempts to reach your office and things like that. So you need to limit. I always say I had a triangle: office, church, home. That's basically my triangle. And from time to time, school plays, when my kids have school plays and things like that. But that's basically it. I am privileged to have very few friends who can really rely on as colleagues that stood by me throughout and would check up on me time to time. They would say, okay, come to this place, which is secluded either at their homes and so forth, just to kind of give me that breather. And I thank God for such kind of friends. Unfortunately, I did lose some friends. Who were very strong, had strong positions about their party of interest, especially those that at the time that were very, very opposition inclined, who thought I was there to basically give leverage to the incumbency and the party at the time. So, of course, distance did grow, which is unfortunate. But for me, I remained the same individual. Even when I was there, my focus was to make sure that I deliver. And I realized that being put there was a privilege. And I didn't go there to plant myself. No, it was to go and to deliver a credible election, which I believe I did with the help of the excellent team that I found at the Electoral Commission.
I heard some people say that you were Judas. That you were Judas who left the civil space when it really needed a voice and a persona such as yours, and decided to go the other side for the greener pastures, And how did you take that?
Judas. I don't even think it was greener pastures per se, Judas. I mean, the civil society was a more comfortable space. It's one that I would wake up, provide my critique freely, without even having to think about it. On the other side, it's something that you have to be able to be cautious because of the institution that you're in. But all in all, it's a similar kind of work. You're basically aiming to better your country, and therefore I didn't see it as a betrayal. I was more inside, able to make the changes that I would have loved to see and advocated for. And we did see a lot of those coming through in terms of electoral process reforms. And therefore, I'm pretty proud that we're able to do that, not in an individual capacity, but as a collective, as a team. Like I said, the commission, I did find brilliant stuff there. selfless, dedicated individuals. Some did join us, very professional, and it made my work very easy. What I was simply able to do was provide the leadership and give them sufficient wings to be able to do that. Very innovative. The IT guys, brilliant. For the first time, I'm sure you did see a lot of innovations coming out. Online voter registration, pre-online voter registration, the introduction of full biometrics. We're going to move, of course, to electronic voting, and all those things. And there are quite a lot of things that were done on this security side of things. Voter education was enhanced. If you look at the corporate affairs team, brilliant team. The communication was enhanced, something that was lacking in the past. Not to take away from my colleagues, of course, this is a relay. Once you take over, you look at where your colleagues left off and you pick it up from there. Our colleagues did do a brilliant job as well, based on what they had done in the past, and we were able to pick it up from there. And we believe we did our level best and delivered a credible election.
Interesting there. So let's get this out of the way, okay? I want us to get this out of the way. Yeah. So you managed to successfully deliver a violent-free election in 2021. Against the backdrop of doubt, and you just went in there, did your job, we all voted, and here we are today, But one thing happened during that time, okay? I remember very well. Media reported that you had fainted. Now, yes. I don't want to, I know health is quite a sensitive thing, so I don't want to push you to say things that you're not supposed to say. Yeah. But we were told, you see, people came out and said, you see, the man is even fainting. The job is too much for him.
It's too much for him, indeed.
So just, what are your thoughts on that, I thought we could get that out of the way.
No, definitely. I think it's an important point, a referencing point. And yes, I did have a blackout, not fainting. And probably could have been through exhaustion or something like that. I've had those from time to time, especially when I'm one of those who tend to neglect their breakfast, not have enough sugar, wake up in the morning, off you go. You even forget about yourself, that you're supposed to take care of your body. And probably that was one way of the body reminding me that, hey, in as much as you have a job to do, you also need to take care of yourself. It was nothing serious, nothing major. And of course, I did take a glass of water, juice, and I was back. And I'm sure those that were following live, it was less than a minute, and I continued presenting. So yes, it did happen. Not in the typical heart attack, fainting kind of thing, basically blackout. And it wasn't something new. I've had that before, especially where I go on a non-stop run, which now I'm quite cautious of my health. I make sure that I have a good breakfast in the morning so that I have sufficient sugar to carry me through the day.
So before we get into domestic resource mobilization, which obviously is the meat of our conversation today, one of the things that obviously comes into mind when we talk about electoral reforms, I think you did highlight a few in passing here that you were championing during your tenure in terms of innovations. But we did hear some sort of concerns or allegations, if you may like, when you talk about continuous voter registration, some certain quarters within the political arena alleging that continuous voter registration would obviously favor the ruling party because it would be concentrated in their strongholds. I just wanted to find out from your perspective, was it the case based on your experience? And secondly, when we talk about reforms at an institution such as the Electoral Commission of Zambia, one of the things that we also tend to look at is its structural composition. The CEO is obviously reporting to the chairperson. The chairperson is appointed by the president. Don't you think that creates some sort of maybe suspicion that whoever the chairperson is will be dancing to the tune of the incumbent?
Yeah, very interesting question. Starting with, of course, the voter registration exercise. One of the things that I made sure when I was at the commission was to make sure that whatever it is that we did was backed by sufficient data And the approach was scientific, starting with the issue of delimitation. Remember, we did conduct delimitation despite it failing due to failure to amend the Constitution. And that was based on scientific parameters in allocating. The same when it came to voter registration. One of the things is, okay, how are we going to conduct this? Firstly, it was a nationwide exercise, something that had never been done. And we're doing it at COVID time. You can imagine the stress during that period. You had to make sure that you safeguard lives and you do it in the shortest possible time to mitigate the impact that would come as a result of prolonged exercise and, of course, impact the health of the individuals and the nation at large. So we needed to look at the scientific parameters, even when it came to allocation of kits in terms of registration, and the data is there. And I think one of the things that I tend to pride myself is that we were also very transparent. We did provide numbers of registration centers, numbers of kits that were allocated to each jurisdiction. You do recall that even the PF at the time did even accuse the commission of favoring Western Province, I believe, at the time, which is perceived as the opposition stronghold at the time. And the narrative changed again from the opposition side that the commission was doing that. But yes, when you look at, in comparison, Western Province population-wise, it's comparatively similar to Mchinga. And Mchinga, the number of, for instance, kits, registration kits that they got was slightly lower than that of Western Province. Western Province had higher, hence the cry. But it's not just about providing kits and then you'll say kits per capita based on the population. No. You're also looking at other factors such as the geographical features there, reach, population disbursement, how people are settled and so forth. Therefore, you might find that somebody will say, oh no, they've given Western Province, this guy is pro-opposition. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, you've taken into account those factors. So if everybody, let's say 20 people are seated at this particular room, there's no point in me allocating 20 kits in here in comparison to 20 that are dispersed. So it's possible I can provide 20 in a dispersed manner. Similar population that is in a particular jurisdiction. So those factors had to be, and everything was done scientifically. So to answer, the short answer to your question is no. There's no such thing that happened, and it was very, very scientific. And of course, as we were registering, we were monitoring and adjusting accordingly. We did compensate where we thought, okay, we needed to have additional kits being taken to the certain jurisdiction, and that was done. And all that was done scientifically and communicated, actually. And if you go back nowadays of social media, this is something that you can always trace back. And I always like that because now everybody will bring it back to your face and say, hey, you said this, you did this. Mm-hmm. So information is there. With regards to reforms, it's extremely critical, and every institution should undergo reforms, not for the sake of reforms, but for the fact that you need to adopt to the changing environment. The environment is always constantly changing. More so when you look at the electoral environment, democracies, the way we are conducting elections is evolving globally, not just Zambia. And reforms need to be able to respond to that. But they also need to respond to the needs of the people as it pertains to how elections are conducted and the gaps that are identified. One way, of course, is that after every election, there are observer reports that are given that identifies the good, the bad, and the ugly. And therefore, it's imperative immediately after elections, you go back, you look at that and be able to undertake the reforms. Specifically to the question you are talking about as it pertains to reporting and its ability to be able to undermine what you do as a commission and later on as CEO. That is a huge concern, definitely, and it's not just Zambia, it goes across. But this concern can be addressed in terms of how the appointment procedures are done. I was fortunate enough when I was doing my master's in electoral policy and administration. I did a comparative study of Zambia, Zimbabwe, and South Africa as it pertains to appointment procedures. Unfortunately, Zambia was lacking amongst the three countries. Mm-hmm. this is one area we can be able to strengthen. And it's not just peculiar to the Electoral Commission. It's the way it's designed. You look at most of these appointments, talk about judges and so forth. One of the parameters we need to look at is enhancing transparency, also bringing an element of public scrutiny that we do not have as it pertains to appointments. There are also aspects that are weak within our law. Appointments really basically rubber stamping when it comes to Parliament. The president has what I can call more powers than anybody else. The appointee of the president, it's rare that anybody will go against it. But in the principle of building public trust, when somebody is appointed, and it has nothing to do with the credentials of individuals, when somebody is appointed, there has to be a transparent mechanism that builds trust in those individuals. And in Zambia, that lacks. Once the appointment is done, it goes to Parliament. It rarely fails, as long as you're able to meet the minimum benchmarks as set out in law. But there's more to it. Even in an instance, for instance, Parliament says, no, this candidate cannot go through. At the third instance, the law provides for automatic appointment. So basically, those are some of the reforms that we need to look at. But there are many more that we can address to build that trust and integrity in the institution. And like I said, it has nothing to do with the individuals. It's about building the required trust, and people know that if they vote, their vote is safe, and that the individuals that are there have the interest of the nation and not the interest of the appointing authority. And this is very, very important. And this is where also integrity becomes very, very important. The individuals that hold these positions, be it at the commission or any other governance institution, need to realize that the service is to the nation and not to the appointing authority. They are professionals, and I believe they'll do that. I hope they do that.
All right, so you are watching The People's Space, and of course my guest is Patrick Nshindano, the former Chief Electoral Officer at the Electoral Commission of Zambia. And we are talking domestic resource mobilization, taking into account the recently announced 2025 national budget. But of course, we had to lay ground, first of all, just to be able to understand what his experience was like at the Electoral Commission of Zambia. We'll be back shortly after the break. Welcome back to The People's Space, and today we are looking at domestic resource mobilization vis-a-vis the recently announced 2025 national budget. And my guest is Patrick Nshindano, who is a non-figure when it comes to the issues of advocacy surrounding fiscal governance and socio-economic development. Now, Patrick, just to pick it up from where we left from, now we move on from the Chief Electoral Officer. We now get into the Patrick the Economist, Patrick the Fiscal Governance Man. Let us first of all look at what is very, very important, looking at where we are as a country. The challenge of debt is pretty much prominent, and that brings into question the aspect of domestic resource mobilization. Yeah. How important is domestic resource mobilization as we speak? And I would like to find out from you, looking at where Zambia is, copper-rich country, and we are now talking about the issue of the transition, the green transition. How can we maximize domestic resource mobilization?
Yeah, DRM, domestic resource mobilization, really, it's an area that I've long been passionate about. You recall, this is an area that we did quite a lot of work, including yourself and myself, and a number of colleagues in civil society. And the simple reason is this provides an avenue for sustainable development. And when you're making reference to domestic resource mobilization, what does it basically mean? This is a country's ability, really, to be able to mobilize resources internally without having to look outwards. Internally through your natural resource, God-given resource. And out of that, you generate the required resources to be able to finance your different programs. You're talking about your health sector, your infrastructure, and including the debt itself. And one of the cries has been the fact that when you look internally and the wealth that Zambia has, particularly the mineral wealth that we have, it is sad that we're still grappling on this front. A lot of wrong decisions have been made on the policy front. A lot of selfishness continues to be exhibited on that front, on part of our leaders, which we need to do away with, really. We will be clocking 60 years this October, independence. At the same time, we have 60% of poverty levels. I mean, that is shameful for any country. At 60, you can't have that level. Partly of the reason is that we've failed to harness this resource that we have. And part of harnessing the mineral wealth, the mineral rich that we have, is through domestic resource mobilization. And that domestic resource mobilization is the one that you use now to be able to invest in various sectors and be able to curb the poverty levels, the inequalities that we have, be able to provide quality education for our children, be able to provide quality healthcare, not just quality healthcare for our people. If you look at our healthcare system, despite the many improvements that we've done, it leaves much to be desired. Cancer center is always topical. We have a lot of our brothers and sisters dying as a result of lack of facilities, lack of qualified personnel. All this borders around our ability to raise resources. But also, if you look at the tax burden that Zambians carry is extremely high, both directly and indirectly. And partly, again, it goes down to domestic resource mobilization effort. Even where relief is supposed to be provided, we are unable to provide that because we do not have the capacity. We do not have the resources to be able to provide the required relief in form of subsidies, various subsidies. Even now, we are talking about these harsh conditions of drought and so forth. But what is government doing in terms of cushioning the Zambians as it pertains to that? There are very, very minimal measures that are being put in place. If you look at even statistics, most developed countries, subsidy is a key component, and this is what I always find very, very challenging, where people look at subsidies as a cost. To the contrary, even when you look at well-positioned subsidy programs, they have an economic benefit because they're able to provide additional income. For example, if you look at the transfer program, that's a subsidy program. It will provide income to that individual, but beyond that, it will also provide liquidity within the community within which they're operating. They'll be able to spend so that somebody at the Kantemba will get something out of it and so forth. If you look at subsidy in the controversial of, say, fuel, if that is passed on, it reduces the cost of doing business. That cost comes down. Who is it passed on to? It's the consumer. But if you look at Zambia now...
But the argument there, obviously, from the current administration is that, cost reflectivity is the way to go to attract more investment in the sector.
Yes, the two should not be confused. Firstly, the business should be competitive enough, yes, to be able to attract investment. But government also has a deliberate role to be able to provide these services. For instance, let me give you a practical example now. Now we had an application by the ERB, by ZESCO to ERB for emergency tariff. And that emergency tariff hike is basically targeting the challenge that has befallen us, which is the drought period. And the fact that they need to import power. And it's important that they do so to keep industries running and to be able to make sure that even SMEs are able to survive and so forth. Without power, we've seen the devastating effect that this has had on our economy and indeed on individual lives. But where you have the ability to be able to mobilize resources domestically, this is where government comes in. Because now what is going to happen is that the burden is going to fall on who? The already impoverished people. That cost that business is going to bear as a result of the increase in the cost of tariffs will not be borne by the business. No, it will pass it on. And already, if you look at the condition, it's extremely harsh for most households. We're talking about 60% of poverty. And there's this argument, no, those do not consume, they do not drive, and so forth. But beyond the driving, beyond the high consumption, these things come in indirectly through the production wheels of this country, be it transport, be it factories, and so forth. But where you have enhanced domestic resource mobilization capacities, this is where a government comes in to be able to cushion. And this is why we pay taxes. Government comes in at such a point in time, but they're unable to do so because of the constraint that we have and, of course, the high indebtedness. They don't have that ability. So we need to start thinking differently. How do we make sure that we enhance our domestic resource mobilization capacities? Part of the key lies in our mineral wealth that unfortunately we've not been able to tap into and harness that potential that we have.
Talking about enhancing domestic resource mobilization, obviously we have to look at the current environment that we exist in. And Zambia is largely informal when it comes to businesses, be it micro. But do you think much has been done to be able to help, what could be captured from the informal sector to be able to supplement DRM? Some have said, well, what you get in the informal sector still, can't really compare to what you can get from the mines, okay, which would be true. But should we just neglect the informal sector and leave it as it is?
Yeah, definitely. One of the challenges, of course, domestic resource mobilization, and this keeps being reiterated when you listen to various ministers of finance that we've had, that our tax base is narrow, we need to broaden it. And this is a song that has been there for decades. I'm sure if you pick every budget speech, you will hear broaden tax base, broaden tax base, broaden tax base. One of them that usually pops up is, of course, the informal sector. My argument has always been the informal sector will continue being informal if they're not given the reason to formalize. It's not just about saying, no, let's force these businesses to formalize. There has to be an incentive. Why should I formalize when I know that if I formalize, my business is going to be penalized? The system is punitive to my growth. I'll decide to operate and continue operating in the informal sector. So the one way to make sure that the informal sector becomes formalized, for government to look at it proactively and provide incentives that draw the large informal sector to formalization. Not the other way around, where you're saying, okay, you're hiding in your informal sector, we're going to make sure that we formalize you. It doesn't work well. And this again goes to the environment, operating environment, business environment, what incentives you're providing. We are quick to provide a good operating environment for FDIs, the mining sector. But to Edson Mavuro, if he decides to open a studio tomorrow, what incentive is Edson Mavuro going to do? Are you going to prefer to operate from your home and get your business and not formalize? Because the moment you know that you formalize, you'll be taxed off your business. Mm-hmm. So these are some of the things that we deliberately need to look at. How do we make sure that we stimulate the SME sector? I'm glad that the current government did put up a ministry that is focused on this, but I'm yet to see tangible results coming from there as it relates to that. Even when you look at the budget now, as it pertains to allocation to that ministry, there's nothing much to talk about in that direction. So these are some of the things that we need to really focus on. And of course, taxation on the mining sector. This has always been a huge, huge problem for this country. I don't know why we are shy of taxing the mining sector. But we need to be bold enough. This is what they say, the goose that lays the golden egg. Mm-hmm. And, for Zambia. This is our comparative advantage. We need to take full advantage of it, but not kill it. And it's simple. It's basically about a consistent, fair tax regime. You come up with a consistent, fair tax regime as opposed to these unnecessary incentives, waivers, and so forth. Look around, definitely. I mean, this argument of saying, no, we need to incentivize to boost production. The past 3 years, production in Zambia, copper production has been going down. If you look at the figures, even its contribution to GDP 2022, 2023 has actually been in the negative. So what's the essence of doing that? And even when in comparative terms, you see jurisdictions like Congo, mineral royalty, extremely high. I've just forgotten the rate, but I can't compare. It's a war-torn country. War-torn in the sense that there's a lot of conflict going on in different jurisdictions of Congo, but it doesn't stop investment going in there. All these incentives that we provide are icing. What you need to provide is make sure that you provide a conducive environment, a stable fiscal regime that will know when an investor is coming in the country. It's predictable. But that allows also the country to be able to get its fair share. It's not just about giving out, saying, no, we have investment, you reach this so many metric tons. So what? Who's benefiting from those so many metric tons of copper? It's externally. These multinationals will come and take that resource out of this country.
Patrick, obviously,
it will not sit in Zambia.
Okay.
I mean, poverty levels keep going up. This is why I'm quite passionate about poverty, because, I mean, it's unbelievable. 60 years, 60% of
the
poverty.
The CSPR man is still somewhere in there.
It's a tragic, really.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So, Patrick, obviously, due to the interest of time, just briefly, I would like to tap your brain on this. You know, the 2025 national budget highlights an increase in domestic net financing, in domestic net financing of debt compared to external debt. Any implications on this?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a crowding out effect already. When you look at the current environment, it's very difficult for one to get financing later on for the SMEs, in addition to the challenges of energy that they're facing, now to get affordable financing. The most secured and preferred entity will be government. Financial institutions will basically just be playing around buying bonds and different government securities. And in the end, you don't have the required growth. And there's always this, it's better off that government is on external market as opposed to the internal market. And this has always been the argument for most experts. They'll say, okay, even where government is being active in terms of borrowing, let them do it externally so that they provide the requisite space for domestic businesses and banks and financial institutions will be able to provide the comparative rates that will allow for businesses to go and get financing. But now it's extremely difficult unless you want to wind down through repossessions and all those things that come through as a result of failure to pay. It's not a good space to be in. And one solution, of course, again, domestic resource mobilization is the most sustainable way to be able to finance your businesses. So to be able to finance your budget, not businesses. Okay. One area, again, mining. I think just in reference to the budget, when you look at the mineral royalty, I think it's accounting for about 9.9% in the budget. And when you look at payee, it's about 15%. So meaning that Zambians are carrying a higher tax burden than the mining sector. And this is the mining sector in terms of earnings accounts for over 80% of our forex earnings. There's really something wrong structurally in terms of how our economy is structured and how we mobilize resources. We really need to sit down and look at some of these bottlenecks where they sit. And on the mining front, we need to be honest with ourselves. We are not doing justice to this country. We need to be very honest, bring the mining firms to the table and realize that we need a win-win situation. As it stands, it's definitely not benefiting Zambia. Boosting production is not in the interest of Zambia, it's in the interest of the business entities. We'll record this, GDP has gone up by so much, but when you reflect in terms of what is coming to Zambia, we'll still have these high poverty levels. So we need to get to a point where Zambia is winning investors are winning, stable fiscal regime for the country, especially in the mining sector. And once we get that, we utilize that comparative advantage, we can be able to invest in various other sectors, agriculture, tourism. There's a lot of infrastructure gaps in this country. To open up our tourist routes, if you look at the northern route and so forth. We're always talking about the northern is unexplored and so forth. Part of that is infrastructure. We do not have the required requisite resources to do that. So unless we really manage this resource very well, we'll continue singing this song for years and years. And unfortunately, like I said, if you pick up any budget speech for the last 10 years, it sounds almost like you're reading the same speech. The only thing that changes are the figures that are put in there.
And the names probably.
Exactly.
So before I let you go, Patrick, obviously, in one word, how would you describe the 2025 national budget?
It's a difficult one. I understand where we are sitting. Of course, high debt. Government had to make sure that they make the provision for that. And as a result of that, it has basically taken away a lot of fiscal space to be able to spend in other. But we don't see much change in terms of the struggles that we are facing. The energy sector, in as much as we might see a bit improvement, it still remains more of a medium to long-term journey in terms of resolving those challenges. So businesses will continue facing those. Government needs to be proactive. I think government needs to be bold enough. I know we are on a program which should be coming to an end, I believe, is 2026. Yeah. So we're on a program. Government needs to be bold enough and be able to engage and say, these are the challenges we are facing, especially in the energy sector, and provide the requisite relief for businesses. Businesses are closing down. I have a few colleagues that have seen literally winding down their factories and so forth. And the impact is devastating. Them, they can say, okay, I'll pause for a couple of years while things stabilize. But imagine that impact on that family. And we know how our situation is. One individual supports 3-4 families around. Poverty levels will continue going up. So we need to really rethink. The thing about public policy, is that it should be able to be responsive to the environment and the needs of your country. As you are moving, you look, okay, what do we need to shift? What do we need to change? You do not have to be stagnant in a particular position. Yes, we do realize the rationale behind the subsidy, especially as it pertains to energy, fuel, and so forth. But at some point, especially now, where the government needs to come in and provide the requisite relief, they need to do that and do that boldly. Yeah.
If you do not suggest solutions, then you are definitely part of the problem. And here on the People's Podcast, we do definitely focus primarily on the solutions as we converse on broader and diverse topics with regards the Zambian economy. My guest today has been Patrick Nshindano, of course, the former Chief Electoral Officer from the Electoral Commission of Zambia. He did serve within the civil society organization at CSPR, where he was the Executive Director. And currently, as you heard, he's busy. He's not just loafing around, but busy doing quite a lot of stuff and just contributing continuously to the development of this particular nation. And we have been focusing on domestic resource mobilization, which is indeed important, looking at where Zambia is at the moment, if at all the 2025 national budget is going to yield any positive results, looking at the current macroeconomic conditions that we exist in. The name is Winston Mavoro. Thank you for watching. See you next time.